All right. Get ready because today we're going deep, really deep into how to speak English like you were born doing it.
Sounds fun.
You guys sent in a ton of great stuff, articles and tips and everything for sounding smoother and more confident when you're speaking English.
It's like a fluency cheat sheet.
Exactly. So get ready for Fluency Fast Track. We're talking rewiring your brain to actually think in English and even shadowing, which is like, well, we'll get to that.
I'm intrigued already.
But first, one thing that really pops out from all this material is just how important it is to be consistent, right?
Yeah, it's not about cramming. It's more like making English part of your everyday life.
So it's daily speaking practice more than anything, but what makes that so powerful?
Okay, think of it this way. Your brain is like a muscle.
Okay.
And the more you use it to speak English, even little bits here and there, the stronger those connections get.
Yeah.
You're basically rewiring your brain to be fluent.
So like instead of struggling, it just becomes more natural.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you first learn to ride bike, it's all wobbly, right? But then with practice, it's like second nature. Speaking English is kind of like that.
I like that. So how do we actually do this? What were some of the tips?
Well, one that I thought was interesting was to actually schedule time for it.
Yeah.
Like, put it in your calendar, a real appointment you can't miss. Even 15 minutes can make a difference.
So make it official, like a commitment. I like it. What about recording yourself speaking? The articles seem to think that was a good idea.
So it is. It's like listening with new ears.
How so?
You pick up on things you wouldn't notice otherwise. Like maybe there's a pronunciation thing you do, or you say too much, things like that.
Oh, I am so guilty of the ums.
Yeah.
But those little things matter, huh? What about those language exchange apps?
Those are great. It's like having a friend in your pocket who speaks English.
I've heard of those, like Hello Talk.
Yeah, Hello Talk, Tandem, there are a bunch. You can chat, have calls, even video calls.
Cool. Okay, so next up, vocabulary. Seems simple, but the sources mention something that takes it beyond just memorizing words.
Right. It's not just about learning them, but about using them right away.
So actively using them.
Exactly. Pick a few new words each day, then actually try to use them when you speak or write. Like if you learn intriguing, you might tell a friend, hey, I found this intriguing article.
Makes sense.
It's like when you learn a new dance move, you got to try it out.
I gotcha. And speaking of trying things out, the sources mention good old-fashioned flashcards and some apps that use them.
Oh yeah, Anki and Quizlet. I love those. Spaced repetition.
See, I thought flashcards were kind of old school.
They can be, but these apps are really smart. They use how your memory works to make sure you actually remember those new words.
Like a personal vocab coach in your pocket.
Exactly. Now, pronunciation. I know it can be intimidating, but the sources say it's so important.
So it's more than just sounding right.
Way more. It's about being clear and confident. Even small errors can cause confusion or make you sound unsure of yourself, even with perfect grammar.
Like your message gets lost if people can't understand you.
Exactly. So how do we get better? There's this technique called shadowing.
Okay, what is that?
Basically, you pick an audio or video, could be a podcast, or even a scene from a movie, and you try to mimic the speaker, intonation, rhythm, everything.
So it's not just about the words themselves, but how they're said.
Exactly. You could even pick someone with an accent you like and try to sound like them.
That's a fun idea. Now, I'm an app nerd. Are there any apps that can help with pronunciation?
There are. There's one called ELSA Speak. It gives you personalized feedback, tells you how close you are to native pronunciation.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is.
Huh.
And there's Forvo. It's like a pronunciation dictionary. You can look up any word and hear it spoken by native speakers.
Okay, so we've got practice, vocabulary, and pronunciation covered. What's next?
Time to talk about media immersion. It's where things get really fun.
Oh yeah, movies, music, all that.
Exactly. The sources all agree. It's one of the best ways to improve, and it's enjoyable. The key is choosing stuff you actually like.
I'm with you there. I learn way more when I'm interested.
Right. There were a couple of interesting strategies in the sources for making the most of media immersion.
Oh, like what?
Well, one is to start with subtitles, especially if you're a beginner. But as you get better, challenge yourself to turn them off.
That makes sense, like weaning yourself off a crutch.
Exactly. It forces your ears to do the work.
I can see that. And that way, you're really picking up on the rhythm and how native speakers connect words.
Right. And don't forget all the slang and idioms you can pick up from movies and shows, especially podcasts.
Oh, those are the things that make you sound really natural.
They are. Textbooks can only teach you so much. You need real-world exposure.
Okay, now for something that seems a bit mind-blowing, the sources called it thinking in English. Basically, it's like rewiring your brain.
It is. Instead of translating from your native language, you train yourself to think directly in English.
Okay, but how do you actually think in a different language?
It's simpler than it sounds. Start small. Describe your surroundings in your head using simple English. Like, I see a table. The sky is blue. Things like that.
So instead of thinking, I need to go to the store, I'd think, I need to go to the store in English.
Exactly. It's a small change, but it starts building that pathway in your brain.
Mm,
And then you can gradually do more, like practice internal dialogues.
that's interesting.
The sources also suggested journaling in English. It's a good way to get your thoughts down without any pressure.
I like that. It's like giving your thoughts an English accent. Okay, so we've touched on apps, but what else did the sources say about how technology can help us speak English better?
Technology is like a secret weapon. And what's cool is a lot of it is easy to use and free.
Okay, I'm all for making learning easier and more fun. What did the sources say?
They mentioned using voice assistants like Siri, Alexa,
Oh yeah, those things are everywhere now.
Right. Well, it's good practice. You can ask them questions, tell them to do stuff, even just chat a little.
It's like having an English tutor on call 24/7. And you can do it while you're doing other things.
Exactly. And another cool one is using speech to text. You speak, the app types it out. It's great for seeing if you're pronouncing things correctly.
Yeah, I've used that to write emails. Never thought about it for pronunciation. That's smart.
And of course, there are those language learning apps we talked about, like ELSA Speak, which can really help you focus on your speaking.
Wow, technology is amazing for learning languages.
It is. But the sources also mentioned that sometimes a good old-fashioned English class can be really helpful.
Yeah, sometimes you need a real person to guide you.
Right. Websites like italki and Preply let you take one-on-one lessons with native speakers. And there are English-speaking clubs if you prefer a group setting.
I've heard those clubs are a fun way to practice and maybe make some new friends.
Exactly. And that brings us to our next point, which is about setting goals that are actually doable.
Hmm.
Lots of people give up because they aim too high and get discouraged.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. Like, where do you even start?
The sources said to break down big goals into smaller steps. So instead of saying, I'm going to be fluent in 3 months, which is probably not going to happen, set a goal like, I'm going to learn 5 new words every day.
I like that. Small steps you can actually track.
Right. And speaking of tracking, they also mentioned keeping a journal to monitor your progress. It helps you stay motivated.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget how far you've come. It's nice to look back and see that progress.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most important things, patience and persistence.
I have a feeling this is key.
It is. The sources were very clear. This takes time and dedication. You're going to hit bumps along the way.
I'm sure everyone feels that way at some point.
Definitely. It's like learning any new skill. There will be times when you want to give up.
So how do you stay motivated? What helps when things get tough?
One thing that the sources recommended is to remember why you started learning English. What are your goals? What do you want to be able to do? Keep those things in mind.
It's easy to lose sight of the big picture when you're struggling with grammar, but remembering your why can help you push through those tough moments.
Another good tip is to celebrate even the small wins. Every new word, every conversation you have, those are all victories.
Yes, celebrate all the milestones. It helps you stay positive. And speaking of staying positive, let's talk about something that goes beyond just grammar and vocabulary, understanding the culture.
Oh, that's so important. Sometimes you can say something grammatically perfect, but it still sounds wrong or even rude if you don't get the cultural context.
Yeah, like you're missing the inside joke.
Exactly. That's why immersing yourself in English media can be so helpful. Movies, TV shows, they give you a glimpse into how native speakers actually interact, what they find funny, what they value.
It's like a crash course in cultural awareness, right?
It is. And one of the best ways to really get it is by talking to native speakers, whether it's through apps, online groups, or in person.
It's about getting out there and experiencing the language in action. And you know what? We're going to have to talk about making mistakes.
Oh, it's inevitable. But the sources really stress that mistakes aren't a bad thing. They're actually essential.
Like, they're part of the learning process.
More than that, they're opportunities. Every time you mess up, you have a chance to learn and grow.
I like that way of looking at it.
Right. The sources had some good tips for turning mistakes into positive things, like keep a mistake journal where you write down what you got wrong and why.
Oh, that's a clever idea. So you're turning your mistakes into study material.
And don't be afraid to ask for clarification when you don't understand something. People are usually happy to help.
It's true. Most people are flattered when you show an interest in learning their language. And sometimes the most embarrassing mistakes can be the best learning experiences.
Oh, for sure. I remember one time I tried to compliment a friend on her dress, but I used the wrong word and ended up saying it was disgusting.
Oh no.
I know, right? But she laughed and explained the difference, and I've never forgotten it.
I guess sometimes those awkward moments really stick with you. Okay, so we've talked about learning from native speakers, but what about finding your own voice?
Oh, that's so important. The sources made it clear that fluency isn't just about copying others. It's about expressing yourself in English.
So it's not about erasing your own personality or background.
Nope. It's about bringing all of that to the table. Your unique perspective is valuable.
And that's what makes language so interesting. So how do you find your own voice?
The sources suggested focusing on what you're good at and what you like. What are you passionate about? Build your vocabulary and fluency around those things, because that's where your natural enthusiasm will come through.
Makes sense. If you're interested in something, you'll be more motivated to learn about it. And they also talked about experimenting with different styles, right?
Yes. Try writing different kinds of things or speaking in different ways. Formal, informal, funny, serious. The more you explore, the more you'll discover what feels right for you.
It's like trying on different hats to see which one fits best. Okay, now for something that often trips people up, idioms.
Ah, idioms, those expressions that can make you scratch your head and wonder what's going on, but they're key to sounding natural.
It's like the secret language of native speakers. So how do we crack the code?
The sources suggested focusing on idioms that are useful for you. Don't try to memorize every idiom out there. Choose ones you'll actually use.
So if you're into cooking, you might learn idioms about food, like spill the beans or have a sweet tooth.
Exactly. It's about making them relevant to your life. And pay attention to the context, because sometimes the literal meaning is totally different from the intended meaning.
Right, like it's raining cats and dogs doesn't actually mean animals are falling from the sky.
Exactly. But as you learn more idioms, you'll start to pick up on the humor and the cultural insights they contain.
Okay, before we wrap up this part, I think it's important to talk about confidence. It's something that came up a lot in the sources.
I agree. Confidence is what lets you use all these tips and techniques to actually speak up and express yourself.
So true. But confidence can be hard to find when you're still learning. How do you build it up?
The sources really emphasized focusing on your progress, not on being perfect. Celebrate every milestone, every new word you learn, every time you have a conversation.
So it's about being kind to yourself, recognizing that every effort counts.
Exactly. And another thing that helps is surrounding yourself with supportive people. Other language learners, teachers, friends, family, anyone who encourages you.
It makes a huge difference to have people who believe in you.
It really does. And remember, fluency is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn. The important thing is to enjoy the process.
That's a great message to end on. To all our listeners out there who are on this journey of learning English, remember that you can do this.
We believe in you.
So before we move on, we'd love to hear from you. What tip or technique has resonated with you the most so far? What's one action you can take today to get closer to speaking English like a native? Keep thinking about that, and we'll be back with more insights and inspiration.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. You know, before the break, we were talking about confidence and how important it is to remember that it's all about progress, not perfection.
Yeah, it's so easy to compare yourself to, like, native speakers and feel like you'll never be as good. But the sources really emphasize that fluency it's a personal thing. It's different for everybody.
For sure. And you know what can really help? Focusing on your strengths. Like,
Yeah.
what are you good at? What do you love talking about? When you're into something, your confidence just comes out naturally.
It's like finding your passion, and then it gives you energy, right? You kind of
Yeah.
forget to be nervous.
Totally. And speaking of things that flow, let's talk about small talk. I know a lot of people find it awkward, but it's really how we connect with people, you know, in everyday life.
Yeah, it's like the warm-up before the real conversation. But it can be tricky in a new language.
The sources had some good advice for that, though. Like, one tip was to ask open-ended questions, ones that make people talk about themselves.
Oh, so instead of just asking, do you like movies, you could say, what kind of movies do you enjoy?
Exactly. It shows you're interested, and it takes the pressure off you to do all the talking.
Like a back and forth, a give and take. Another thing the sources mentioned was to think of small talk as a chance to practice, like improvising.
Right. You never know where it's going to go. So
Yeah.
be open to that, try new words, and see what happens.
It's like a game, kind of. A fun challenge. What's another way to get better at this?
Just pay attention to how native speakers do it. Listen to what they talk about, the questions they ask, even their body language.
So, like, observe and learn from the best. You can do that anywhere, right? Coffee shops, waiting in line, wherever.
Exactly. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. What about giving presentations in English?
Oh, that's a big one. Talking to friends is one thing, but standing up and giving a presentation, that's a whole other level.
It is. But the good news is, a lot of what we've talked about still applies. Preparation, practice, finding your voice, those are all important.
The sources had some good tips too, right? About making presentations less scary and more effective.
One was to start strong, with something that grabs the audience's attention.
Oh, I see, like a hook.
Yeah. A good story, a question, even a little humor, anything that makes people want to listen.
Like setting the stage, creating an atmosphere.
Totally. And they also talked about having a clear structure, like a roadmap for your ideas.
So, like an intro, main points, and a conclusion. I've always found that helps.
It does. It keeps you organized and makes it easier for people to follow.
What about using visuals?
Oh, those can be great, like slides or pictures. But they should add to what you're saying, not distract from it.
Got it. So the visuals are like supporting actors, not the main star. Which brings us to delivery, right? How you actually present.
Yeah, your delivery is what brings your words to life. It's your voice, your energy, your connection with the audience.
So things like making eye contact, using your hands naturally, making sure everyone can hear you.
Exactly. And the best way to get good at that is to practice. Record yourself, get feedback, even join a public speaking group if you can.
It's like rehearsing for a play. And speaking of getting nervous, that's a big thing for a lot of people, right? Especially in a second language, that fear of messing up.
Everyone gets nervous. But the sources said to try and think of it as excitement instead. You're about to share your ideas with people.
I like that. Turning those nerves into something positive. What else helps?
Telling stories. Stories are powerful. They connect with people on an emotional level.
And they don't have to be big, complicated stories. Little anecdotes from your own life can make your presentations more interesting.
Exactly. It makes you relatable, and it's a good way to show off your language skills in a natural way. So I'm curious, what are some of the things you guys find challenging about giving presentations in English?
Yeah, we want to hear from you. What are your biggest struggles? And what tips have worked for you?
Remember, this is all about learning from each other.
We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive into speaking English like a native. Don't go anywhere. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into speaking English like a native. Before we left off, we were talking about how powerful storytelling can be, especially for presentations. It's amazing how a good story can grab people's attention and make your message memorable.
Yeah, stories have this way of getting past our logical minds and connecting with us emotionally. It's like they sneak in wisdom through a secret passage.
I like that. It's like how kids get lost in bedtime stories. It's more than just words. They're being transported to another world.
Exactly. And we can use that same power when we speak English, weaving in personal stories, little moments of humor, vulnerability, those things that make us human.
So it's not just about the language itself, it's about making it come alive. Speaking of which, let's talk about humor.
Oh, humor. It's such a great tool for learning a language. Not only does it make things more fun, but it also shows you're comfortable with the language and the culture.
It's like you're saying, hey, I get it, I get your jokes. But I think a lot of people are afraid to use humor in English, They're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
I get it. It can be tricky. But the sources had some good advice for using humor the right way.
Okay, like what?
Well, one thing they said was to pay attention to how native speakers use humor in different situations. What kind of jokes do they tell? How do they use their voice and timing? What cultural references do they make?
So it's like studying a comedian, trying to figure out what makes them funny.
Exactly. The more you see, the more you'll develop your own sense of what works. And as you get more comfortable, you might even start to notice the funny side of everyday things. Those little quirks of language, the unexpected things people say, it's all around you.
It's like finding the humor in everyday life, right? Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something really important. Being kind to yourself. The sources called it self-compassion.
Oh, that's so important. It's like having a friend in your head who's always rooting for you.
I like that. Because learning a language can be hard, There are going to be days when you feel frustrated, like you're not getting anywhere.
Absolutely. It's totally normal. But the sources said it's all about how you react to those feelings. Instead of putting yourself down, try to see those moments as chances to learn.
So focus on the positive, on how far you've come, even if it's just a little bit.
Exactly. And don't forget about your community,
Hmm.
the other people who are learning, the teachers, your friends, your family, anyone who supports you.
That's so true. It makes such a difference to have people who understand what you're going through. And one of the best things about learning English is all the doors it opens. You can meet people from all over the world, experience different cultures, travel to new places. It's amazing.
It really is. It's not just about the language. It's about expanding your world and who you are.
Well said. So, to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Becoming fluent in English, it's a journey, a lifelong adventure. There's always something new to discover.
Exactly. And it's okay to take your time, to enjoy the process, to celebrate every victory along the way.
Remember, you're not alone on this journey. We're all in this together. So keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep believing in yourself.
The world is waiting to hear what you have to say.
And that's it for our deep dive into speaking English like a native. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep those conversations going and keep learning and growing.
See you next time.